Hi, welcome back. Today is day 3 of the Rio Denver Hack Sew Along, and today's hacks are showing you the cuff that you can add buttons to, and as well as thumb holes, and then turning your 1-inch hem into a casing for a drawstring, and you can do that using grommets. I'm going to be using 1/2 inch grommets, or you can also do buttonholes as well. And I'm wearing the crop. This is with no modifications. This is just cut at the crop line, and you can do this on the top length and the dress length as well. And you're pretty much just going to be doing like we did yesterday, where you just cut the curve off. So it's a really easy hack, and this one's my favorite. And so we're ready to get started. So today I'm going to start by showing you how to add the buttons to your cuff. So for this hack, you're going to need your Denver hoodie cuff piece, and you're going to cut 2. And if you do that as is, you're going to end up with about a 3-inch cuff. If you'd like one taller, you can go ahead and make note of the width of your cuff piece and then just cut it taller, keeping in mind that it's going to be folded in half. So if you want, say, a 5-inch cuff, you're going to cut this 10 inches high. Or if you want a 6-inch cuff, 12 inches high, and so forth. As well as if you want a shorter cuff, you would reduce the size, keeping in mind that it's going to be folded in half. So I'm going to do mine as is. So I have my 2 cuff pieces cut, and you're also going to need interfacing if you'd like, depending on what kind of fabric you're using. And I'm using Hachi, which is a pretty lightweight knit, so I do have a little bit of interfacing here. And I'm going to be using ring snaps, but you can use buttons or whatever you'd like to kind of embellish the side of your cuff. So if you're going to be adding interfacing, you're going to apply that right here in the middle, right in between these 2 notches, because this is your center of your cuff. So it's perfect. So it's there to help you mark where you would need to put that, keeping it out of the seam allowance. So cut it just a little bit shorter, making sure that you have the 1/4 inch for your seam allowance that you're going to be using. And you can either you can interface the whole center, or you can use just half and just interface one side. It's all up to you. I'm using a really lightweight one, so I'm just going to go ahead and interface the entire center. So I'm going to go and iron this on my cuffs to the wrong side. So now I have my interfacing attached right in the center here. And now I'm also going to take my cuff piece and I'm going to press it wrong sides together in half so that I get a crease here. So now we have our cuff piece pressed in half lengthways. So you can unfold it, and you have 2 options here. You can either sew your buttons on through 2 layers, or you can sew it on through just 1 layer, so that when it's folded, the back side of the snaps you added or the buttons that you added is tucked inside, so it's hidden. So it's entirely up to you. I think it's easier to just apply them through both layers, so that's what I'm going to do. So however you need to, find out your spacing, and you still have this notch so that you can find the center very easily. So you just want to make sure that it's below 1/4 of an inch from this top edge, because you're going to attach your cuff. So you're going to need this 1/4 of an inch. So make sure when you attach your buttons that you leave a little bit over 1/4 of an inch at the top so that you can attach your cuff later. So mine are going to look like this. Make sure that they're centered with that notch. And so I'm going to go and attach my snaps with this spacing. Okay, I'm back, and you can see that my snaps actually turned into buttons because my snap pliers didn't want to work. So I feel like this is cuter anyways. Some buttons. So I have my buttons attached. And now it's time to attach the cuff. So grab your sleeves, right side up, and you're going to take your cuff piece and right sides together. Actually, we need to find the center of our sleeve. So find the center just like that. And you're going to line up that notch, right sides together. Then pin at the side. And now I'm going to stitch this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now I have it stitched on, and I went ahead and did it with both of my sleeves. So I have both of my cuffs attached, and now we're going to attach the sleeves to our bodice the way we have in the last two videos and in the Rio Sew Along. I'm not going to necessarily show you that because I feel like the steps are pretty much always the same. So I'm going to go ahead and attach these sleeves, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. So I went ahead and finished my entire top, attaching the sleeves, my crew neckband, and this is a crop top, and I did a 2-inch band. So the hack from yesterday, I only did a 2-inch band versus 3 inches, so it's just a little bit shorter. And you can see that I have my long sleeves with my cuffs with my buttons. And how adorable is this? I can't wait to try it on and see how it looks. So for these next two hacks, which are the thumb hole cuff and turning your hem into a casing with the drawstring, I'm going to be just making one top, so it's going to have both those options. So I'm going to show you how to prep your pieces to cut first. So I did mine the crop length, just cut at the normal crop line, but if you do this drawstring hack with the top length, I would remove the curve. And if you like your crop top a little bit longer, you can cut it anywhere. It doesn't have to be at the crop line. It can be anywhere on the pattern that you like. And remove the curve from the dress as well. And you can make it any length you want as long as you make sure that these two parts match up so that you're folding your pattern pieces front and back at the same spot. So as long as it matches here and here. I did the regular crop length, but it looks really cute at the high hip line or even as a longer crop. The regular crop line hits at your natural waist, which is where you bend from side to side. So feel free to cut it anywhere you'd like. So that's for the drawstring hack. And for that hack, you're also going to need a drawstring. You can use twill tape or something like that, but I'm going to be making my own drawstring. And I recommend doing the width of your fabric. So I did 60 inches, and you can always trim it shorter if you need to. So I did 60 inches by 1.25 inches. So to make a new cuff piece that we can make thumb holes on, you're going to take your Denver cuff piece and a blank piece of paper, and we are going to we need to add 1/4 of an inch to each side so that we can make we need a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance there. We can't do it with the 1/4, so we need to make it a 1/2. So we're just going to extend these sides by 1/4 of an inch. And how you do that, I like to fold mine in half and take a sheet of paper and fold it in half as well. Line up the folds, and we're just going to trace a new piece. So I'm just going to tape. Just tape this on here. I mean, you can always eyeball it, but we're going to be precise for the sew along. So then you're going to extend it 1/4 of an inch. So we have that extended out 1/4 of an inch. So now you're going to cut yourself a new cuff using those new lines. And there you go. Now you have a new cuff piece that you can use to cut out your cuffs. So you're going to need your 2 cuffs. And now what we're going to do is we are going to need to prep these cuffs. So you're going to first take your cuff and fold it wrong sides together, And we're going to press it so we have a nice crisp line. So now with the cuffs pressed in half, you have this line that you know is the center point. I'm going to go ahead and mark it with a pin as well, but I'm going to fold my cuff right sides together, and then I'm going to put a pin right where that crease is. So now we have the midpoint of our cuffs marked. So now you're going to measure a 1/2 inch above that crease and pin, and then as well as below. So above and below that half point, making it the center inch. You can go ahead and remove that middle pin once you have those two above and below points marked. And I'm going to also mark it with a fabric pen, just so you can see it a little bit better. In between those 2 points. Now, from the top and the bottom of your cuff, you're going to measure 1 inch from the raw edge, the raw bottom and top edge. So we're going to place a pin here. And we're going to place a pin here. So now we have from the top at 1 inch it's marked. Then we have the center crease and then a 1/2 inch above and below, making that the center inch. And then we have from the bottom raw edge, from the bottom edge up 1 inch. So 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch. Now after you mark both of your cuff pieces, you are going to sew you're going to sew from the top down to the first pin with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to sew the middle inch from the top to the bottom. So you're not going to sew the part that's not marked. You're going to sew down to the first pin, in between the 2 middle pins, and then from the pin down. These 2 parts will be left unsewn. And you're going to do that with your regular sewing machine. And I like to do it with a straight stitch. And it's going to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Don't forget that part, 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now I have my cuffs sewn at the markings, and I did this one in a different color thread so that you can see the inch that's sewn here. This part's left unsewn. The inch that's sewn here, and at the bottom with this one also, this space also being left unsewn. So now we're going to turn our cuff with the seam up, and then we're going to press our seam open. the 1/2 inch seam. We're going to press this open. So now we have both of our seams pressed open, and now we are going to fold our cuff in half along that original memory press, and make sure those seams stay open, pressed open, and we're going to line up the holes that were left unsewn and pin it in place. So now you're just going to sew around the hole with your regular sewing machine as close to the edge as you can. So it'll be kind of that almond shape. You're going to sew this part and sew this part all the way around, making sure to keep those edges lined up as close as you can. And you're going to make sure that you keep these other layers out of the way as you sew. And making sure to keep those edges lined up as close as you can. And once you get to the other side, pivot and turn, and then go along the other side. So you can see I sewed all around the opening. And now we have a cuff with a thumb hole. So now I'm going to show you how to make the casing with your 1-inch hem. So your top usually has a 1-inch hem. So if it were folded the opposite way, it would look like this, the inch. So you're going to find the front center of your top so that we can put buttonholes or grommets right in the front center within your hem so that we can make it a casing. So you have to do that first. So what I did was I pressed my top in half so that we have the center crease. I also marked it with a pin if you can see that. So you found the center front. And then you're going to, I could do this on the wrong side. We're going to measure up an inch. I'm actually going to mark it with a fabric pen. So measure up an inch from the bottom raw edge, and within that crease that you made, place a mark. And then also place another mark 1 inch up from that mark you just made. So that's marking the 2 inches that we need for our hem. There's a dot there and a dot there. So we know that we need our grommets or our buttonholes to go in this area within this inch, because we're going to hem this, and then that's going to be our casing. So you see that center crease mark, and you can use interfacing for this to help stabilize it, especially if you're using grommets. I'm going to be using these 1/2 inch grommets. So I did about 2.5 inches just so that they would fit, because these are kind of big. And I'm going to place the interfacing centered within the 2 dots. So I'm going to go apply it centered in the top inch section, not the bottom inch section. So I'm going to go iron my interfacing on. So I know it's pretty hard to see, but I have my interfacing applied, and you can still kind of see those 2 dots. So I'm in that top inch section centered. And I also went ahead and memory pressed my 1 inch hem too, just so you could see that line as well. So you can see where you need to put your buttonholes or your grommets so that it's within this area, because you're going to sew that 1 inch hem. So you need your buttonholes and grommets to be within that area. So now you're going to mark where you want them. I'm going to just draw a center line. Okay. So you're going to see where you want them. Mine are kind of big. So I'm going to need them to be as close to this crease as possible, just so I will be able to hem it at the end. So I'm going to mark my placement. Making sure that they're even. I'm going to put them a little bit closer. So I'm going to go apply these per my manufacturer's instructions. So once I do, it's going to look like that. And these are super big, so I'm going to have to get them way down as close to my line as possible. So now I have my grommets installed, so that when I go and press this hem, this will now be a casing for our drawstring. So you would do the same thing but with buttonholes, keeping it within that 1 inch. And then don't forget to open your buttonholes before you sew up your top. Make sure you open your buttonholes at this part too, otherwise you might cut through your top. If you sew it first, you might cut through your casing. So make sure you open up your buttonholes while it's still flat and your hem's not sewn already. So now you're going to continue on with the construction of your shirt as usual. So my top is constructed. I did my side seams. So now we're ready to attach our cuffs. And then I also went and pressed the hem of my back bodice, so that now we are ready to do our 1-inch hem. And then we're going to also attach our cuffs. Now, one more note is that if you wanted to do the buttons on this one as well, now would be the good time to do that before you attach it. And you would just find those notches that are where you want to line up your buttons, and you can stitch them on. That way you can have a thumb hole cuff with buttons even if you wanted to. So you would just find your notches and put your snaps or your buttons there, and now we're ready to attach our cuff. So we're going to line up the thumb hole seam with the side seam of your sleeve, right sides together. So I'm going to slide my cuff inside, lining up these seams. And then finding the other midway point of your sleeve and then lining up those notches with that point. And now we're ready to sew on our cuff with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're also going to hem our top with the 1-inch hem. So now we have our cuffs attached and we have our top hemmed. Now it's time to prep our drawstring so that we can feed it through the casing that we just made. So I'm going to take my drawstring piece and I'm going to go and press it right sides together in half, the lengthwise. And I'm going to do that so that it's easier to sew. So we're just going to be making a tube. So I'm going to go press this, especially because this fabric, this French terry, likes to roll, so it's a little bit easier managed if you go and press it in half first. So now with this drawstring pressed in half, right sides together, I'm going to sew along the long edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now I've sewn along the entire width, and you're probably wondering, why did I not clip it? Because that would be so long, and I was not about to do that, because I'd be lying if I did it for the video, because I do not do that when I sew. So you essentially made a really long tube, and now using your favorite method, I'm just going to use a safety pin. We're going to turn this big long thing right side out. So I like to use this big safety pin, nothing fancy. So now we've got our drawstring, and we're going to feed it through our casing in one side and back to the other side. And once I try it on, I'll trim them to where I like. I'll tie it and trim it to where I like. How cute is that? And then you could put like a little bead on the end or something cute, but I'm just gonna tie it in a knot. Pull it nice and tight. And trim off that little excess. And here we go. Now I'm just gonna go and add my hood. I'm doing the self-lined hood on this one. And now I'm going to have a raglan crop top with the drawstring and thumb holes. So here is my finished cropped hoodie with a drawstring and thumb holes. I hope you enjoyed this sew along, and remember that you can mix and match all of these hacks. And I did want to note that you can put a kangaroo pocket with the drawstring hack, but I probably wouldn't recommend it for the crop because it would obviously be way too high on your body. But for the top and the dress length, you can do that as long as, especially for the top, the dress length, you would find your placement wherever you like it, maybe at your hip length. But for the top, you would put it above the 2 inches. That is going to be your casing. So in the beginning, when you marked where you're going to put your buttonholes and everything, you would sew your kangaroo pocket above that. So above the 2 inches that you need at the bottom for your hem and casing, you would sew the kangaroo pocket above that. I probably wouldn't make it part of your casing because it would make it too bulky. So I would just put it up above your casing, so you can absolutely do that. You can have a high hip length or top length drawstring top with a kangaroo pocket if you wanted to. So this is the end of our sew along, and I can't wait to see which hacks you try first and which ones you pair together. So have fun, and I can't wait to see what you make. Thank you so much for joining.